Welcome in, everyone, to the Challenge After Show. I'm Dan, that's Jenna, and tonight we're talking the best villains in Challenge history. Now, we're starting off right here on the YouTube. Later on, we're going to switch this over to Patreon. But Jenna, did you know that just for $1 a month, you can watch us, and we put over 4 videos on there a month, so that's like 25 cents a video. How fun and how nice.
Funny you asked, Dan. I did know that personally, and I contributed $1 to watch myself have a conversation that I've already had in the past. I want to relive things sometimes. You know, I get very nostalgic. I'm aware of that, and so is my mom. I don't know if you've heard this. I may talk about it a few times because it's traumatizing. She refuses to pay a single dollar to watch us review the challenge and talk. So I wonder if any of our internet friends and typical watchers and commenters could please, you know, be better than my mom.
Yeah, well, and they also, if anyone's concerned, Challenge season 37, we're going to air all that right on the YouTube, and we're just going to have more bonus content like this on the Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, you want to get right into it, Jen, and talk about the best villains in Challenge history?
Well, before we get right into it, I want to preface it by saying, up until 30 seconds before Dan and I went live just now, we had some clarification that needed to be said about what we mean by villains. My understanding was a little bit different than his. So my preparation this week has been all about who's the biggest asshole, who's the biggest douche, who is cold-hearted, who is mean-spirited. But then Dan kept saying before we went live, these are the best villains of all time. So I think I went a little bit of a different direction. These might not be the most like villain character, maybe not who we love to hate. It might not be who comes off as like oh, this guy's such a good villain. It's maybe more these people might be just not the best people.
Well, but I mean, everyone's going to have their own definition of what makes a good person, but I think we're not too far off. I think we're just a couple pages apart, not a full book apart. So I think that we're going to be just fine, because I have people on here that I don't like, but other people that I think I do like them because they're so villainous. So it's interesting. Sound good?
Yeah. And I didn't mean to phrase like that because we're all flawed. And I know that a lot of people have come around and come full circle, but let's just say they haven't had the most shining moments on the TV show. Like we can, you know, everybody makes mistakes and everybody can be forgivable. So let me say that. These are just people that maybe didn't come off as a villain character, but maybe just were mean-spirited to other people along the way. But I think it hits all fronts. So I'm very intrigued onto what you said, because I also intentionally tried really hard not to go for the gimmies, not to go for the ones that everybody's going to think of. I think we'll see.
It's also your opinion. So if the gimmies are who you think are the best villains, then they're the best villains. You can't help that. So yeah.
Right. Well, don't worry. In Jenna fashion, I have an extensive slew of honorable mentions to go through. So.
As do I. So the way this will work is we'll do our top 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then we'll do our honorable mentions, and then we'll do our final one. Yes. So easy enough.
And you can start too. This was very hard to arrange the rankings and very hard to narrow it down. Up until right before we went live, I was switching people, had to cut people from the list, move people around. So it's still, I mean, it's a bit all over the place, but I think I narrowed in on what I think is my best version of the list.
I love it. I love it. I do. I love doing these bonus type of clips, because to do the research for this is just fun to delve back. We're not watching anything on TV like we regularly do. We're just going on the internet and like looking for our villains that we used to love or still currently love. Because there's people on my list, at least in the honorable mention section, that aren't even on the show anymore. So here we go.
All right. You want me to go first or you're going first?
Ladies first, of course. You're first.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. You're first.
5th spot, right? So I'm going 5. You're going 5, 4, 4. Okay. And my 5th spot is somebody who, if you've watched our show for a long time, you know my feelings on this person. And you might be surprised that they're only in the 5th spot and not the number 1 spot. Who do you think this is, Dan?
And then I think it's Johnny Bananas.
No. Oh, okay. See, that's what I mean by caricature of a villain. This person, I think, just might be like a real life villain. And that is Zach.
Oh.
For so so many reasons that we've discussed. I think that he's treated his partners in the past very shitty.
Yes.
Especially the female partners and teammates. Super misogynistic on the surface, I believe. He treated Jonna like trash when they were partners on Battle of the Exes. We've seen him be Amanda, absolutely. We see him just being like so frustrating to watch in his relationship with Jenna. I think frustrating is the best word because I love Jenna, and therefore that's why he's in my 5th spot, because he must have some redeemable qualities. But for the most part, it just doesn't seem like he's gaslights her on the regular from what we've seen on each episode, manipulates every situation. So she's the one in the wrong. Meanwhile, it's his fault for there being a fight or an argument. He's always right. It's Zach's world. I mean, he just seems like nobody that I want to hang out with. So that's why he's my number 5 villain.
I don't think that's a bad spot for him to be in, because I think you also have to take into consideration being a good villain on the show, being like a strategic villain where you're just like playing the game almost in a dark and mean way. And he doesn't, I'm not sure he has that type of quality in him to do it that way, where he's just mean to people on the show. So I think that's a good spot for him as a villain.
Yeah, I think he's mean to people on the show. And also maybe this doesn't make him a villain, but competitive wise, he seems to be a lot of brawn, but doesn't necessarily always back it up. We've seen him struggle immensely in several challenges, endurance, or losing in a sledgehammer elimination to Jordan, a competitor with one arm. So we've seen him kind of like puff out his chest a little bit, but then not always back it up. So I don't know if that makes him a villain, but he just seems like
Look, it's your list, and people can comment all they want in the comment section. That's fine too. It's great. In my 5 spot, I'm going with a female villain. Any guess?
Sexist.
I have majority are men on my list, but yes, there is.
All men are villains, Dan. Every man on earth is a villain.
So why would I even put a female on this list? I'm not sure then. My first female villain, because there's going to be 2 of them, is Laurel. If you remember Laurel. Had, yes.
I forgot about her.
I just mean if you remember what she did that was so villainous. Can you give me, do you remember what she did on the show that was so villainous over the years?
Yeah, Laurel has been talk about mean-spirited. So it's really weird, my perception of Laurel, because I like to think of her as a badass female competitor. No one can step to Laurel. Laurel is awesome, and she's going to bring her A game every time. But every time I rewatch a season, I'm like, damn, she was just mean. She was an asshole to everyone for no reason.
And she had reasons, but they were just, I don't even know if they were reasons. They were just like, she would make fun of Big Easy's weight back in the day. Remember Paula, she like made fun of her having like an eating disorder, or like made fun of her for thinking that she had one, or maybe she did, who knows, but that's not something that you do. And then the most recent one, well, there's 2 recent ones, but one of the recent ones, her and Cara Maria, for that whole season, she treated her like just trash. Not that I'm a huge Cara Maria fan, but no one deserves to be treated that poorly by somebody else. And what was the most recent one where she didn't stab the right part of they climbed up that tower. Yeah, she started sucking it to, what bad sportsmanship was that? That was insane how mean and villainous she was there. Who the hell was she going against too? That was so recent.
It was against Ninja. It was against Ninja Natalie. Because I remember Ninja was smart enough to say, that doesn't look right. I don't think she followed this as precisely as you're supposed to, because it's something a lot of competitors wouldn't have caught, because you're in the heat of the moment. You have to really like intricately look at someone. It was trees. They had to nail posts in a tree or something like that. And she skipped one of the holes that she was supposed to nail it in.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And she's also villainous in the way that she plays the game too. And I think that's going to be a part of being a best villain, is she was always trying to sneak behind people's back and backstab people and do things of that nature. Nowadays, they all are doing it, but some are doing it more so than others. And I think that she's one of those ones that will try to play a villainous game. So I think that's why she's also on my list at the number 5 spot.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great choice. And there was another example that pops in my head from Laurel. Gosh, I can't remember the season right now. The season is escaping me, but they split into teams. Cutthroat.
Cutthroat, yeah.
Cutthroat. And she was so mean to Savon or Savon. Yeah, Savon is her name. The one that ended up hooking up with CT that one time on Duel 2. And that's the one that DM found out about. I think Savon is her name. I can't remember. Or Siobhan. And she was just so mean to her out of the blue. That's why it's so weird about Laurel. She just seems to pick at people and poke at them for no other reason than her being bigger and badder. So that's why I think she's a villain. She just like unpromptedly wanted to wrestle Savion so badly and was just like digging at anything she could to try to piss her off. And it just was like such a power trip move and very, very villainous.
Yes. Give me, what's your number 4? I'd love to hear the number 4.
My number 4 is Jordan. And I think Jordan actually is, if you're going to say like best villains, it's not necessarily that I think Jordan is a bad or ill-intended person. I actually think he's a villain character. So he falls perfectly into this ranking. I think a lot of fans and a lot of people on the show seem to not like him because of him being like arrogant or cocky. And no one really likes a cocky person, right? He's very confident in his athletic ability, thinks he's very smart, like just thinks he's good at everything, which I mean, he pretty much backs it up, but that's kind of a villainous trait. And he plays the game in a way where, I mean, the thing that he did against Johnny Bananas when he picked up all the skulls, not that that's being a villain, but if you're a Johnny Bananas lover because you think Bananas is king, then you're going to think Jordan is then like the Joker to Johnny Bananas Batman. You know what I mean?
And it's funny you say that. So the reason Jordan didn't make my list, because he is villainous in all those ways you said, is I don't like Johnny Bananas. So when he flipped over all those things, I was like, he's a hero. Like, it's weird, I know. But it's just how you perceive the show. There's no, I mean, I completely agree. He's done a ton of villainous things. But he also had that thing with Tori, which made me think of a hero too, because he has like this big love thing and like the wedding bells, even though none of that happened, but that's besides the point. So yes, Jordan to me didn't make my list, but I totally agree with what you said. He's definitely a villain in some ways, for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of people just see him as an asshole. So I agree too. It's not that I particularly like personally dislike him, but I think he's a villain character.
Right. Okay, my number 4 spot, I went with someone I mentioned last week, and that's Devin. I think even if you go back, well,
go ahead.
Even if you go back to his time on Are You the One, he was super mean to the girl, one of the girls on that show. I know Pam mentioned her name and I forgot it again. But he's been villainous even from day one on his MTV debut, which is Are You the One? And he's obviously carried that forward through the challenge. And but you tell me why do you think he's not a villain, or what do you think?
No, I think you're right. I considered him. I think he is the perfect quote unquote villain because he plays that role. But it's very clear to me that he wants to play that role. That's my only point. Is like, does he execute it well enough where we can actually call him a villain, or is he just someone who wants to be the villain and knows that that's his place? You know what I mean?
Hey, if you want to be a villain and you back it up, you're still going to jail, right? If you're a criminal, you're a villain, whatever you want to call it. Like, you know, he wants to do the time, he's going to do the crime, whatever you want to say. I think he's a villain. I do. I don't know if in real life he's this mean to everybody. I don't think so. He's doing it for the show, but he is entertaining me as a villain, not a hero. So I put him in for best villain because he's entertaining so much to me personally.
No, you're right. He definitely is a villain because he pokes. If we're talking about poking people's buttons and instigating things, he's always the first one on the front lines of a drama fight. Like, he's there to stir the pot, he's there to spread gossip and just piss you off, basically. But it's funny, again, because it all comes down to perception. He's definitely more a villain than a hero. But there were like heroic moments that Devin had in my mind. Like, I remembered when he was on the season Exit or Rivals 3 when Bananas stole the money from Sarah, and Devin and Cheyenne somehow made their asses to a final in their first season. And I loved them so much together. And Devin really hopped on to the side of Sarah's defense when Banana stole the money and was like really in her corner and really vocal about it. And I remember being like, hell yeah, Devin, like, thank you. Everything you're saying is so correct and articulate. So I really appreciated him for that. So in some moments he can also be like the nice guy.
And same with, well, I mean, I loved when he challenged Bananas to the button pushing game. I love that type of, so he became a hero for 2 seconds, but he was such a jerk to Bananas about it. versus Jordan. When he did, Jordan pushed the things down and just went against Bananas. Devin goes against Bananas and talks shit the whole time. So he's to me, he's a villain because he doesn't care.
That's funny about that elimination, because I'm wondering if we can make a different ranking theme, best eliminations and worst eliminations. And I mean, like, that could be your perception, that could be most exciting to watch, that could be the best game or the worst game. That light challenge has to be one of the worst games.
No, it's not a good game, but the setup was so good.
Elimination.
You're right, Jenna. It's not a great game, but the set, you can play that game at like Chuck E. Cheese or in a golf place, like in the arcade. But the setup for it was so good, which is why it's just because I love when Bananas gets whipped by other people on the show. I like when he gets beat up a little bit. Okay. It's number 3. You're number 3. Yes, you're number 3.
My number 3 is somebody you already said. I ranked Laurel even higher than you. Wow. Laurel is my number 3 for all of the reasons already discussed. She is a super villain of the challenge.
I think it's great that we have someone in common. So, but this is good because I think we have some diversity here too. My number 3 is my favorite challenger of all time, and that is
Wes.
Wes is correct. He's the perfect villain to go against another villain, and that is Johnny Bananas. And growing up, I feel like you either wanted Wes to win or Bananas. I felt like it was pick a side. Nowadays, maybe not so much because the lines have been blurred. But when the challenge from 10 years ago was going on and Wes and Bananas were on it, I feel like you picked a side. And I always loved that Wes, he was my hero, but he's also an anti-hero because of the way he runs the game, and he tries to be friends with everybody, but he's really lying because you can't be friends with everybody in this game. And that's a very villainous move. And there you go.